Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Yet another session of forensic medicine class. Here we will discuss the final part of the chapter on ethics and negligence. Today we will discuss about professional negligence or medical negligence. In last two sessions, we have discussed about what are the medical ethics, what are the unethical conducts, means the professional misconduct, then how a doctor should practice medicine ethically. Then we talked about consent, different types of consent, how a proper legally valid consent should be taken from the patient, the different rules of consent, and in today we will discuss what happens if any safeguard or precaution not taken by the doctor and he is faced by a legal case against him that he was negligent in his practice. So the medical negligence is usually of two types, civil and criminal. We will discuss them both, how they are faced, what are the different points about those negligence, and how a doctor should safeguard himself from these legal litigations. Before we start, first discuss about what is negligence. So negligence can be defined in two ways. One, it is the omission to do something that you should do or you should have done, or doing something which you should not have done. That means in a certain situation, some action is expected from you, but you didn't do it. Then that's your negligence. In another situation, you did something which is wrong. You should not have done this. So that is also negligence. So in some big words, it is the omission to do something that a reasonable man, guided by those considerations that ordinarily regulate the conduct of human affairs, would do, or doing something that a prudent and reasonable man would not do. And, and in another way, absence of reasonable care and skill or willful negligence of a medical practitioner in the treatment of a patient, directly causing bodily injury or death of the patient. So this is a more prominent, more relevant definition for our profession. That professional negligence or medical negligence is defined as absence of reasonable care and skill. That is, the doctor, while treating the patient, should have been reasonably cared and very much skillful in his dealings, but there was absence of the care and skill, or willful negligence of a medical practitioner in the treatment of a patient, which directly caused bodily injury or death of the patient. So, this is how professional negligence or medical negligence should be defined. However, this medical negligence, it has four parts in it in the definition itself, or these are the four essential components. And the onus of proof or the burden of proof lies usually on the patient. The patient has to prove that these four essential components of medical negligence is present in their case. So what are these components? They are four D's. First D is duty. So the patient must show that the doctor was on duty the during when the patient suffered a damage. That means a doctor-patient relationship existed at that point of time. Next is the dereliction of the said duty. That means the physician or the doctor failed to comply with the standards of the profession. Next is damages. the patient must prove that the negligent action of the doctor or the dereliction of duty resulted in some injury. That is, this can be direct physical injury or more pain and suffering or a increased hospital stay or increased hospital bill, etc. And there must be a direct cause and effect relationship between the dereliction of duty of the doctor and the damages claimed by the patient. So these are the four components. First, there should be first the patient must prove that the doctor's duty was there. Next, there was a definite dereliction of that duty that has directly caused a damage. So duty, dereliction, direct causation and damage. These are the four essential components of medical negligence. The burden of proof lies on the patient. They must prove that these were the essential components were present in their case. In earlier class, we discussed about professional misconduct, and today we are discussing about professional negligence. So, how are they different from each other? Professional negligence is concerned with the duty of a medical man towards a patient, whereas the professional misconduct it's a violation of the codes and ethics of the medical profession. In professional negligence, dereliction of duty of the doctor in the treatment of the patient directly resulted in a damage of the patient. However, in professional misconduct, there's no duty or dereliction or damage to the patient. In professional negligence, the charge is brought to either a consumer protection forum or a court. In professional misconduct, the charges are brought in front of the state medical council. In professional negligence, in civil cases or in consumer protection forum, the doctor will be paying a fine, and in criminal cases, he can be jailed also. But in professional misconduct, the doctor can be issued a warning notice by the state medical council, or his name can be erased from the state medical register permanently or temporarily depending on the gravity of the case. And in professional negligence, the doctor can appeal to the higher court or the higher consumer protection forum. And in professional misconduct against the state medical council decision, the doctor can appeal to the MCI or via the central government. So this is how the professional negligence and professional misconduct differ from each other. Now, as I said in the introduction, that professional negligence can be of two types: civil and criminal. So first, discuss about civil negligence. What is it? Civil negligence is of again two aspects of civil negligence are there. One aspect is when a patient brings charges against the doctor alleging his negligence and demanding some monetary compensation against the damages suffered by him due to the negligence of the doctor. That is civil negligence. That means the patient will allege that my doctor was negligent in his treatment. It has resulted in increased bodily pain or injury or increased hospital stay or an inflated medical bill or an increased mental trauma and harassment. So to that effect, I demand this amount of money as the compensation. That is one aspect. Another aspect is the doctor will sue the patient party saying that I was reasonably correct in my treatment, but the patient alleges that I was negligent. It's a false allegation and he has refused to pay my professional fees. So that is also another type of civil negligence case. So which will be tried in a civil court. So the main difference between a civil negligence and a criminal negligence is a civil negligence will be tried in a civil court where the patient will file a case against the doctor and they will demand a monetary compensation for the damages. And a criminal negligence is a here the case will be filed in a criminal court. It will be fought between the state and the doctor. Here the state will fight the case against the doctor in in lieu of the patient party, and here the punishment will be a jail term. So this is the main difference between a civil negligence and criminal negligence. So in a civil negligence case, the doctor is liable to pay fine even if it was a charitable case. That means in a charitable camp he did not take any money from the patient, but if the patient alleges that the doctor was negligent and he is able to successfully prove that there was definite dereliction of duty which directly caused the said damages, then the doctor will be liable to pay the fine. However, if there's any error of judgment or a error of diagnosis which doctor of his skill can make, then that is not a ground for negligence. So these are the few examples when the patient party can sue the doctor alleging negligence, civil negligence. Number one is failure to exercise proper care, or failure to do essential diagnosis test. That means the patient came to the emergency department alleging pain abdomen. The doctor does the doctor checks him and decides it's just a mere gastritis and gives in pantoprazole injection and protein injection, and he that's continued for a few days, but later on it got serious. Peritonitis developed. Then ultrasound was done and it was found to be an appendicitis or cholecystolithiasis, etc. So this ultrasound should have been done at the first possible moment when he was checked in the emergency. So that is a negligence in the part of the doctor, and the patient party will sue him. Promising 100% cure, it's a blunder. No doctor should ever in his entire life must promise a patient that he will be cured 100%. What you should guarantee is your 100% care and skill, that you will try your level best and you expect him to make a full recovery. That is the line that should be used, that I will give my 100% and I expect him to make a full recovery. Failure to give proper pre and post operative care. Before the surgery, there should be a proper pre anesthetic checkup to see whether there was any medical condition that can eventually lead to anesthetic complication. This part is often neglected. There should be a proper post-operative care and regular visits by the surgeon himself. This is also often neglected. It is often seen that after doing the surgery, the surgeon gets busy with the other operations and he sends the junior to check up on the patient. And eventually, if some complications develop, then he jumps in. But in many cases, the patient party they allege the surgeon that after doing the surgery, he didn't even bother to check up on the patient even once daily. So this is a case of negligence. Mishaps while giving injection. These has happened many a times. Some injections which was supposed to give intramuscular has been given intravenously. That has led to some complications and cases of negligence. Giving injection in wrong site and by wrong route, as I said, failure to count swabs or pads properly at the end of surgery and leaving one inside and closing. During the surgery, hundreds of cotton swabs and pads are used to mop up the blood from the abdominal cavity. However, at the end of the surgery, it is the duty of the surgeon himself to count each and every swab that has been used before surgery and after surgery and check the number with the OT in charge or the sister in charge. If the count does not match, that means one swab may have been left inside the abdomen. There has been many cases when the patient has again presented with pain abdomen and it was seen that some instrument or a swab has been left inside the abdomen. Do not leave the patient unattended during labor. The labor is a long process, so it is seen that as the labor goes on from 10 hours or 12 hours, though sometimes the doctor admits the patient into labor room and goes on to the OT to do a cesarean section or some other surgery, and in the meantime the patient develops some complications. Do not perform additional surgery unless in emergency. That means you have taken the consent for one surgery, there has been a no scope of extension, it wasn't mentioned properly in the consent, and during the surgery you decided to extend it and remove the appendix which was not the for which the consent was not obtained, then it's a negligence. Criminal malpractice or criminal negligence, it is the patient party brings allegation of malpractice against the doctor, but here the state fights the case against him in a criminal court. Prosecutions are rare. However, all the negligence cases that usually tried in the civil court or consumer protection forum. So the civil negligence and criminal negligence, what's the difference? Civil negligence, there's lack of reasonable care and skill, and in criminal negligence, the patient must prove that there was gross carelessness, with gross absence of care and skill, and no regard for the patient's welfare. That means the surgeon behaves or the doctor behaves rash manner and he did not show sufficient regard for the patient's safety. Civil negligence, it's merely a dispute between two parties in their individual capacity, that is the patient and doctor, they face each other personally in the court. In criminal negligence, however, it is the case between the state and the accused doctor. Um, in civil negligence, if the negligent action of the doctor has not resulted in a gross injury, if the patient party fails to prove that the doctor's action resulted in a direct damage, then the case falls apart. There's no civil action. However, in criminal negligence, the bare negligence involving the risk of injury is sufficient to be proved. That means here the state has to prove that the doctor was negligent enough and it was a risk to serious injury or risk to the life of the patient, even if no damage has actually occurred. In civil negligence, contributory negligence is a defense, which is not a defense in criminal case. Standard of proof rests on the balance of probabilities. But in criminal negligence, the standard of proof requires establishment of guilt beyond reasonable doubt. That means in a civil negligence, the court balances the patient's argument and doctor's argument side by side, and if more probability is towards the doctor's negligence, then the court rules against the doctor. However, in criminal negligence, to give a verdict against the doctor or against the accused person, the court has to ascertain that the guilt has been proved beyond reasonable doubt. That's why it is said that in prosecution in criminal cases is rare. Accused doctor is liable to pay damages in civil negligence, liable to punishable with imprisonment with fine or both as per the provisions of IPC. Mistaken diagnosis, what happens? Mistaken diagnosis is negligent only it implies absence of care and skill. That means uh, in a suspected case of fracture, failure to do an X-ray is a negligence. Okay, but but an X-ray was done. The X-ray was apparently normal, so it was diagnosed. There was no bony injury. However, it happens often that a hairline crack becomes apparent even in X-ray after few days. So after a week, when the patient's pain has not subsided, he does a second X-ray and then he files a case against the first doctor that he made a diagnosis, he made a wrong diagnosis. This case will not stand in the court because the X-ray was done and in that X-ray there was no apparent bony injury. However, it's always a prudent that in such scenarios when you have got a case where suffered a fall in the bathroom or stairs or in the road, there's pain and swelling, but the X-ray looks normal, then you should advise a second X-ray after a week if the pain does not subside. So that should be clearly mentioned in your prescription that you should prescribe ice compression, analgesics, then some PPIs with some crepe bandages and if the for 5 days and if by that time pain and swelling does not go down, then do a second X-ray and get an orthopedic consultation. Okay, so this is how you should treat the case to avoid future complications. Proof of negligence, the standard of proof in civil actions, which is the main kind of negligence, is the balance of probabilities. But in criminal case, it's the beyond reasonable doubt, as I said in the earlier slide. So in medical cases, it lies on the patient party to establish his claim, not for the doctor to show that he acted with due care and skill, because it is assumed. There are, however, certain scenarios when the plaintiff is the person who files a civil suit, does not prove does not prove, and the burden of proof lies on the doctor himself. This is called res ipsa loquitur. Res ipsa loquitur is a Latin term. This is applicable. It means what does res ipsa loquitur means? It means in common knowledge. That means the doctor has done an action which is negligent and it can be understood by a lay person with common knowledge. He does not need a medical knowledge to understand that the negligence has been committed. These are the essentials for proving res ipsa loquitur. That is, the nature of injury or damage is suggested by the common knowledge that without negligence it does not occur. The defendant must be in exclusive control of the situation. The error in such cases is so obvious that the defendant has to establish his innocence, and the plaintiff must not contribute to his own injury. Okay, here the plaintiff is the patient party who files the case. So the doctor has to prove that he was not negligent, he acted with care, but the damage is such that it can be understood by common knowledge that this kind of damage could not have occurred without negligence of the doctor who was in exclusive control of the situation. and patient has not contributed to it. Okay. These are the instances: retention of swabs, pads, instruments, drain, etc. This is a no-brainer if it is if in a later part X-ray or USG it is found that some pad or instrument or swab is left inside the abdomen of the patient from the previous surgery. It's a res ipsa loquitur because the surgeon is in exclusive control of the situation. He cannot say that I did not put the swab in there. Someone just entered in the OT and put the swab. He was in exclusive control of the situation, and patient could not have contributed it because during the surgery the patient was unconscious. So obviously he could not have put the swab in there himself, and it follows from common knowledge that it without doctor's negligence the swab could not have been there. So in such situation the doctor must prove that the type of swab that was found in the abdomen is different from what was used in the surgery. That's why the OT in charge should note the company and serial number of the swabs used in the surgery, and the swab which is later recovered from the patient's body is sealed in presented in the court to see whether the manufacturer company or the serial number matches with what was in the OT records. The possibility of the sponge had been left in another surgery. In the critical traumatic cases, the patient undergoes a number of surgery. So it's difficult to prove that exactly in if there are two or three surgeries, who knows which surgery the swab was left. Absence of causal relationship between leaving the sponge and injury, however, this is not a valid defense. It is often said that this was there to control the bleeding, and it was a plan that this pad will be removed on a later date. Operation, and the second example is operation on the wrong patient or wrong part of the patient. Here also it's a no-brainer. There has been situations when the patient has gone for cataract removal in left eye, but the surgeon operated on the right eye, or there have been a surgery on the left foot, but the right foot was operated on. So it happens in normal cases like knee replacements. There's no apparent injury. The patient wants knee replacement to be done on left knee, but he or she got operated on the right knee. Administration of the wrong substance, that is the mismatched blood transfusion. Mismatched blood transfusion is also a no-brainer. It doesn't need a doctor an extensive medical knowledge to understand that it can be dangerous. So these are the examples of res ipsa loquitur. What is contributory negligence? Contributory negligence is when the patient or the plaintiff contributes to the damage suffered by him. Okay, he contributes to the damage caused by the negligent or wrongful act of the defendant, then it is called contributory negligence. So it is a good defense for the doctor. In res ipsa loquitur, it must be proved that there was no contributory negligence. A defense where the defendant or the doctor has to prove that the patient or the plaintiff failed to take proper care and he did not follow the instructions given by me, and he did not come for scheduled follow-up visits. So that's contributory negligence. In a post-operative complication, mainly the post-operative infection, it is a good defense for the surgeon that the patient did not take good care of the site of the surgery, the proper antiseptic app, the proper vigilance was not exercised by the patient and his caregivers. Regular dressing was not done, antibiotics were not taken regularly, he did not come for the regular follow-up visits. That's why it got infected and resulted in the gangrene. So this is contributory negligence. Sometimes the patient can choose to remove the plaster cast earlier than advised. The orthopedic surgeon, there was a fracture in the tibia, lower end of tibia. The orthopedic surgeon put a plaster cast for 8 weeks. After 4 weeks, the patient feels I'm okay. It's very much bothering to have the plaster cast on, so he goes to a quad and gets that plaster cast removed, starts working. After few days he develops tremendous pain and swelling. Then he shows the doctor that the plaster cast was not done properly. However, it's a case of contributory negligence. The doctor is not negligent here, he is, because he removed the cast early. So this is contributory negligence. Now we'll discuss about vicarious liability. Vicarious liability is something that saves the junior doctor from many negligent cases. Vicarious liability is when the employer gets blame for the mistake of his employees. So what happens? The doctor usually employ or supervise other less qualified healthy members, that is nurses, ward boys, etc. Junior doctors, they train under direct supervision from the senior doctors. So when this junior staff they make a mistake, the liability lies on the senior doctor because they were acting under his supervision. So he should have trained them better and he should have noticed that there a mistake has been made and he should have taken steps to counteract that mistake. He has not done that. That's why the liability lies on the supervising person. That is called vicarious liability. It is also known as respondent superior. That means the superior one is responsible. Let the master answer. That means if a doctor's office nurse injects a drug into patient's sciatic nerve directly, causing an pain or injury, that the patient will sue the physician, not the nurse, because physician is the one who prescribed the drug. Physician is the one who instructed the nurse to give the injection, and he was not there to supervise when the injection was being given. Similarly, the interns, house surgeons, the residents who work under the guidance of senior doctors, professors, they are not answerable to their negligent act committed by them during the training period. Their liability will lie on that professor or the hospital as a whole. It is also known as captain of the ship doctrine. Captain of the ship doctrine means the surgeon is the surgeon as the captain is the last man standing on the ship. He is in charge of the ship and whatever happens within the ship is his responsibility. Surgeon is also the in charge of the operation theater, and whatever mistake is being made or whatever injury the patient suffers after the surgery, surgeon is liable for that. We all have watched the movie Titanic and we have seen that when everyone is boarded on the lifeboats and they were released, the captain remained in his position till his last breath because he is the captain. He will be the last man leaving the ship. So similarly, a surgeon will be there to take the blame for any mistake which has been committed by any member of a surgical team. It is and another term is borrowed servant doctrine. Borrowed servant doctrine means the surgeon is using the skills of the OT sisters, nurses, assistants. They are not his employee, they are hospital's employee. But during that surgery, within that operation theater, they are under his supervision. He has it is as if he has borrowed servants from someone else. But during that time period, they are his employee. So whatever mistake they make, he will get the blame. Another defense for the doctor is medical maloccurrence. Medical maloccurrence means it's an inevitable accident or a kind of act of God. Act of God is what? A natural calamity. These earthquake, tornadoes, Amphan, COVID-19, these are acts of God. No one has control over the situation. So similarly, some unforeseen accident happens with the patient, which the doctor could not have apprehended. For example, the patient got admitted for a pain abdomen. He was operated successfully, but later on he developed sudden cardiac arrest and passed away. It's an unforeseen event. So, if that can be proved that the patient's death is due to a such similar situation, not due to the doctor's negligence, then it's a defense for him. This is called medical malpractice. Similar situation is therapeutic misadventure. But therapeutic misadventure different from medical malappearance is here some the patient was subjected to an accepted line of treatment, but some unforeseen complications has happened. It is of two types: therapeutic, diagnostic, and also experiment. Three types, sorry. Therapeutic, that means the treatment was given proper, but he has developed the adverse effect. Diagnostic means a diagnostic procedure was underway, but he developed the complication. Experimental, that means the patient was served as a subject in an experiment during which he developed the complication. So if this can be proved that it is a case of therapeutic misadventure, then he is not liable to be fined. However, the ignorance However, it is the doctor's responsibility that during the consent, he must mention that these are the likely side effects and also these are the rarest of side effects which can happen during course of the treatment. For example, in a diagnostic procedure, the patient has come for coronary angiography. He was injected the iodine based dye. So the doctor in the consent, it must have been mentioned that there can be anaphylactic reactions or this dye can later on cause some renal insufficiency. These are the likely side effects. If the patient develops an severe anaphylactic reaction to the dye and later on dies due to that reaction, this consent will save the doctor from a prostitution. Doctor must warn his patient about the possible side effects of the drug. These are the examples where therapeutic misadventure is usually proved. Hypersensitivity to a drug like penicillin, aspirin, tetracycline, etc. Radiological procedures, that means some barium enema has led to a rupture of rectum that has caused chemical peritonitis. damage by radiation in radiotherapy, the injury due to electrical equipment, uh, death during surgery, death during blood transfusion. During blood transfusion, it was a proper blood transfusion. There is no mismatch. It was properly matched. However, even in a properly matched blood sample, there can be some minor antigens, which in some rare situation can give rise to an antigen antibody reaction. So these are the examples of therapeutic misadventure. The difference from medical maloccurrence and therapeutic misadventure is a maloccurrence is completely unpredictable. It was unforeseen. No one knew that it would have happened. In therapeutic misadventure is the whatever happened is known to happen rarely. So proper precautions were taken, yet it did happen. So that's the difference. So precautions is prior to prescribing a drug, you should learn about the side effects and tell the patients about it. Sensitivity tests must be done for such drugs where the chances are the patient can develop anaphylactic reactions. For example, in penicillin and as a whole any type of IV antibiotic, skin tests are usually done. They must be done. And the doctor should warn about any side effects, PAM, and especially if they're permanent ones. Okay. Now, two more terms. Product liability. Product liability is when the medicine or the instrument or the appliance they are defective. So it's the liability of the producer or seller, not the doctor. That means if during the surgery the ventilator machine malfunctions, it is the defect of the machine. So the manufacturer or seller are liable, not the surgeon. However, the anesthetist can be responsible if he himself had not checked the instrument before surgery. Before commencing any surgery, it is a duty of the anesthetist to personally check the machine that it is functioning properly, all the gases are there, and all the cylinders are full. If after checking the machine, he finds that the machine is in order, commences the procedure, the patient was anesthetized, the surgery has started, but due in the midway of the surgery, the nitrous oxide valve gets blocked and the patient's anesthesia got warned off. He suffered tremendous pain and later on he sues the hospital. There they can, in that case, the hospital can allege it is a case of product liability. And where the hospital itself is to be blamed, it is called corporate negligence. That means the hospital has failed to maintain and provide the facility and maintain them to the established standards. That means they are using defective equipment, outdated equipment. They have purchased second-hand outdated equipments in cheap to save money, or they are using drugs from unstandardized companies, or they have hired unqualified persons quads by in cheap or by giving them less salary, then they are guilty of corporate negligence. It can so if it is seen that in a particular hospital, different post-operative cases they are developing infections. The surgeons are different, but the hospital is the same. That means either the operation theater is not sterile, it's not fumigated regularly, or the ward or cabin they are not cleaned properly. That's why different surgeons cases are developing infections. So it is a case of corporate negligence. The hospital is to be blamed, not the doctor. These two are defenses. So In some books you can find that negligence is of 5 types: civil negligence, criminal negligence, contributory negligence, corporate negligence, or product liability. In civil negligence and in criminal negligence, here doctor is negligent. Contributory negligent, both doctor and patient are negligent. Product liability, neither the doctor nor the patient is negligent. It is the drug or appliance or instrument manufacturer or seller is liable. Corporate negligence, not the doctor, not the patient is negligent. The hospital as a whole is negligent. So these are the 5 types of negligence or 5 types of negligence. So in the cases of civil negligence, the doctor faces the charge. So these are the defenses usually used by the doctor. He had no duty to the patient. If it can be proved that during that time when she developed complication, he was on leave. He discharged his duties in par with the existing standards of medical practice. That is, whatever I did, it is according to the evidence-based medicine. I behave with the existing standard of medical practice. That must be proved by the doctor. Damage would be due to other person who is concerned with provided the treatment. That means the patient went to another doctor. Damage is result to the third party intervention. Contributory negligence can be there. Third party intervention means some other court or some caregiver has made a mistake. Damage suffering is an expected outcome of the disease that the patient suffered from. That means a patient has come with a breast carcinoma, surgery was done, radiotherapy is going, chemotherapy is given, but despite that, he developed lung metastasis. He died. Now the patient party sues the doctor that there is a negligence. But the doctor will argue that everything was done according to the standards of practice, but the lung metastasis is an inevitable outcome of the disease. There is a therapeutic or diagnostic misadventure, or it's a case of medical malappearance, or it's an error of judgment. Medical malappearance, as I said, it's an act of God. No one could have anticipated that it could have happened. Misadventure is it's a rare adverse effect to a known line of treatment. This is so the doctor will that it's a standard line of treatment. I took all the precautions, yet the rare side effect has happened. It's a therapeutic misadventure. I am not to be blamed. Sorry. Or there's an error of judgment. Error of judgment means there are two treatment modalities were there. There was the doctor opted for one and the patient died, and the patient party alleged the doctor have taken if he would have taken the other modality of treatment, the patient may have survived, but it's an error of judgment. Nobody knew what would have happened. Res judicata. Res judicata means the case has been tried in another court where the doctor has already paid a fine. That means if the case simultaneously, patient party files simultaneous cases to a civil court and a consumer protection forum. Consumer protection forum is a fast track court. It gives the verdict fast. So within weeks, the consumer protection forum find the doctor. Later on, when the case goes to the civil court, the doctor can argue that it has already been tried in the civil in the consumer protection forum and I have paid the fine. Now the civil court will dismiss the case. It's called res judicata. No person can be punished twice for the same crime. Damage is the result of taking unavoidable risk which was taken in good faith for interest of the patient with consent. That is in emergency surgeries. Consent was taken, it was done in good faith for his benefit, but the patient did not survive. Patient persistently insisted on a specific line of treatment in spite of doctor's warning. In spite of doctor's warning, he opted for another alternative line of treatment and suffered a complication. In any negligent cases, the case must be filed within 2 years from the alleged date of causation of damage. That is, if surgery was done in June of 2020, the case must be filed before June of 2022. If it is filed later date, then the doctor can move for the. We as a doctor will be monitored by the State Medical Council, MCI. Any case against doctor can be tried into the civil court, or the patient party can lodge a complaint to the State Medical Council. If that was not enough, now we are under the Consumer Protection Act also. Supreme Court ruled that whatever the service doctor provides to a patient, these are professional services provided in exchange of a professional fee. So the patient is a consumer and a doctor is the service provider. So the entire medical practice comes under the ambit of Consumer Protection Act. This judgment has not invented a new liability. It has simply laid down the doctors provide a service and they are accountable for that. And another benefit for the patient's party is that consumer protection fora, they are usually a fast track type of court, so the judgments are given much more faster than the traditional judiciary. Here also there's a period of limitation of 2 years. That period is counted from the date on which cause of action has arisen. That means the day he has developed infection after the surgery, from that date within 2 years, the case must be filed into the Consumer Protection Forum. There are as in the traditional judicial hierarchy, there are four types of court: magistrates court, sessions court, high court, supreme court. In the consumer protection fora, there are three types of court. One is the consumer redressal forum, state level consumer redressal forum, national consumer redressal forum. In a district forum, it is formed by two members, of whom one must be a woman. State must be formed by minimum two members, of whom one is a woman, and a national consumer redressal forum must be of at least four members, of whom one is a woman. Duration: everyone who can hold office for 5 years. But for district, their upper limit of age is 65 years. For the state, upper limit is 67 years. For the national, upper limit is 70 years. Now, what is the jurisdiction? This is important. A case where the compensation claimed is less than 1 crore, it will be tried into the district consumer redressal forum. If it is between 1 crore to 10 crore, it will be tried in the state consumer redressal forum. And if it is more than 10 crores, it will be tried in the national consumer redressal forum. The doctor can appeal against the verdict given by district forum in the state forum, and against state forum into the national forum. And again the national redressal forum, he can appeal into the direct into the Supreme Court. Now, in after the advent of the consumer redressal forum, the doctors are heavily fined. In the no fine is less than 50 lakhs. They are fined in the tune of lakhs to crores. So to safeguard the doctor's interest, the insurance companies have come with a scheme. It is called medical indemnity insurance. Indemnity means reimburse. Here, the doctors who opt for this medical indemnity insurance, they give regular monthly or yearly premium just like a regular life insurance policy. So here the insurance company, they give a cover for 50 lakhs or 1 crore or 10 crore. For that, a type of an amount of premium and this frequency is established. Doctor pays that premium annually or monthly in regular intervals. After that, if in future the doctor is sued in any court, then in lieu of the doctor, in his favor, the insurance company will now hire a lawyer to fight the doctor's case. They can hire a medical legal consultancy service even to help the lawyer in the case, and these fees will be provided by the insurance company. And even if the doctor is paying a fine and the doctor is fined, that fine will be paid by the company itself. So this is the benefit of medical indemnity insurance. It is now a virtual must have thing for all doctors. I will urge all my students and anyone who is listening to this video, if you are a registered medical practitioner and then if you don't have a medical indemnity insurance now, date it tomorrow. Date it as early as possible. Doesn't matter doesn't matter that you are a regular practicing physician or you are a medical teacher or you are a specialist or you are a general practitioner. You can be sued in the court and that amount will be 50 lakhs and above. You can be sued for crores. For that you will have to sell your property. So it's prudent to get the medical indemnity insurance right now. So all the students who will get the internship completed and then get the registration number, the first thing to do after getting the permanent registration number is to get the medical indemnity insurance done. With that, I will conclude today's lecture. Thank you very much for your time and patience. It's a very important class and a very important session. I hope I have been able to discuss them to the best of my ability. And if you have any query, please feel free to reach. Thank you very much.